West Haven wasn't just a town, it was a bubble. Safe, predictable. That's what made what happened to 8-year-old Gavin Hansen Peterson so terrifying, so incomprehensible. Because in this town where everyone knew everyone, no one saw it coming. Gavin was born on a snowy January morning in 2012, a bright-eyed boy with a love for Pokemon, video games, and the simple joy of being a kid. He was the youngest in his family, the baby, adored by his parents, Melanie and Shane. He had siblings who doted on him, a stepmother who, at first glance, seemed like just another thread in the fabric of a blended modern family. But beneath the surface of birthday parties and school drop-offs, something dark was growing, something twisted enough to turn ordinary life into a waking nightmare, and the unthinkable was just waiting for its moment. This isn't just a story about a missing child. It's a story about trust betrayed in the most chilling way imaginable, about the psychology of control, manipulation, and violence hidden in plain sight. It's about how evil doesn't always come with warning signs. It sometimes moves in, tucks your child in at night, and smiles at the neighbors. And when the truth finally came out, the entire town was shattered. I'm Dominik, and this is True Crimes by Dominik. If you're drawn to the kind of stories that leave your heart pounding and your mind racing, hit the like button and subscribe. We dive deep into the darkest corners of real-life crime. And as you listen today, ask yourself this: how well do you really know the people closest to your children? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have seen? What would you have missed? Because by the time anyone realized what was happening behind closed doors, Gavin was already gone. Everyone who spent time around Gavin Peterson seemed to walk away with the same impression. He was a light in the room. A cafeteria worker named Jan Davis once said he was the happiest kid she'd ever met. Not just cheerful, radiant. The kind of boy who could lift your mood with just a smile. It's the kind of detail that cuts even deeper when you know what's coming. At school, Gavin was known by name, not just as a student, but as someone people genuinely loved. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking. He was just good, innocent. The kind of child you picture when you think of everything worth protecting in this world. His mother, Melanie, had custody of Gavin and his 2 older siblings through their early years. She loved her children. That was never in question. But love isn't always enough to keep a family safe. In 2014, when Gavin was just 2 years old, everything changed. A police officer spotted a toddler walking alone down a neighborhood street, barefoot, confused, completely unaccompanied. That toddler was Gavin. Locals who saw the child immediately recognized him and pointed the officer to his home. But what the officer found inside was a different kind of story, one that would send shockwaves through the family. Melanie was inside the house, disoriented, and in clear possession of marijuana, along with drug-related paraphernalia. It was enough to trigger a child endangerment case. Because if Gavin was found wandering the street like that, what else had these kids been left to endure behind closed doors? The report was filed. A call was made to Gavin's father, Shane Peterson. And just like that, a custody battle became a crisis intervention. Melanie faced consequences. She was ordered to complete 100 hours of community service. She was fined $600. She was enrolled in mandatory mental health treatment and placed in a drug rehabilitation program. It was the kind of year that knocks the wind out of a person, a reality check that could either break you or force you to rebuild. And Melanie tried. By all accounts, she was determined to get clean, to stabilize her life, to bring her kids home. There was a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this was rock bottom, and she could climb back up. But sometimes the road to redemption is never finished. Sometimes the damage is already done. And for Gavin, the day his family truly felt whole again would never come. For Melanie, it felt like no matter how hard she tried to claw her way back, she was already marked. The court didn't care that she'd completed the programs, or that she showed up every time without fail. What they saw was a record, a history, a risk. In the eyes of the system, stability mattered most. And on paper, Gavin's father, Shane, and his new wife, Nicole, offered exactly that. A two-parent home, clean record, seemingly structured environment. To the court, that looked like the better option. But for Melanie, it was devastating. She had fought tooth and nail to become someone her children could rely on again. And just like that, the door slammed shut. In one interview, she said, "I did everything I was told to do, not just for the court, for myself. I knew I needed help. I got it. I didn't run from it. I went to every class, every appointment, because I wanted to be better. For them." You could hear it in her voice. She wasn't just sad, she was defeated. Still, she refused to disappear from their lives. On her scheduled days, Melanie would show up like clockwork, early, eager, waiting at Shane's house with open arms. And little Gavin, he'd run into them every single time. He'd throw his arms around her like he hadn't seen her in years, tell her all about his Pokemon cards, what he ate for lunch, which friend annoyed him at school. He loved his mother without hesitation. To him, those visits were everything. But with the older two, Tyler and Melanie, things were different. Off. There was no running into her arms, no excited chatter, no warmth. Tyler, the oldest, had started pretending she wasn't even there. He'd look right past her, like she was a stranger. Melanie, on the other hand, seemed constantly on edge. Like every word Melanie spoke struck a nerve. Small things, harmless questions, casual observations, seemed to trigger her. And Melanie was left standing there, confused and heartbroken, wondering when the closeness they once shared had quietly slipped away. She tried not to push. She didn't want to make things worse, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Why were two of her kids suddenly treating her like a problem, while the youngest still clung to her like home? What had changed? And what, if anything, was happening behind closed doors? There was a time, however brief, when it felt like they were just a normal, blended family trying to move forward. All of them living under one roof. Shane, his new wife Nicole, and the kids. For a while, things actually seemed to settle. According to Gavin's sister, Melanie, those early days at their dad's house felt stable, even peaceful. There were more rules than what they'd been used to with Melanie, sure, but nothing extreme. Shane was always the more disciplined parent. He liked structure, expected obedience. Nicole, his wife, was the one who enforced it when he wasn't home. She made sure chores were done, beds made, dishes cleaned. On paper, it looked like a household trying to stay afloat. But soon, cracks began to show. It started with little things. Nicole, who was supposed to be a new maternal figure, never missed a chance to tear down the kid's real mother, Melanie. Every comment was laced with disdain, subtle at first, until it wasn't. The children began to notice how their stepmother never let up. She turned every mistake into a judgment, every chore into a punishment. Still, Melanie, trying to adapt, tried to bond with Nicole. For a time, she even saw her as a second mother. That's what makes what followed so much harder to talk about. Because there was no dramatic turning point, no obvious trigger, just one day, Nicole changed, like someone had flipped a switch. The verbal jabs turned into screaming. Then came the name-calling, cruel, dehumanizing, designed to chip away at a child's sense of self. Then came the control, the restrictions, the punishments that stopped looking like discipline and started looking like torture. Melanie wasn't just scolded. She was starved, denied food as a form of power. If she pushed back or tried to assert herself in any way, Nicole didn't just retaliate, she hurt her. And Shane, he saw it. He knew. But instead of standing between his children and the woman harming them, he looked the other way. He buried it, maybe out of denial, maybe out of fear, or maybe, and this is the part that's hardest to accept, because he chose to. What had once been a home became a psychological trap, a place where love was conditional and punishment came without warning. Gavin and his siblings were caught in the middle of something dark, something they didn't fully understand but could feel in their bones, that they weren't safe. And the worst part? This was only the beginning, and here's where things take a colder, more psychological turn. the kind of darkness that doesn't leave bruises you can see. After Melanie lost custody, the family split didn't just happen on paper. It tore down the emotional center of everything these kids had ever known. And for Melanie, Gavin's older sister, the pain didn't come just from losing her mom. It came from watching the people she trusted most turn away when she needed them the most. According to Melanie, her father Shane began to pull back. Not physically, he was still there, but emotionally it felt like he was disappearing. Like instead of standing up for his daughter or standing in the gap, he chose silence. And that silence, it was louder than any fight. Melanie once described it like this. It was almost as if he'd rather keep his peace with his new life than protect his child from what was happening inside their own home. And then there was her brother, Tyler. They had always been close, best friends really, that kind of sibling bond that made everything feel a little more bearable. But that changed too. Because Nicole, Shane's new wife, had already shown she could turn people. She had done it before with Melanie. Now it was happening again. Slowly, deliberately, Nicole started turning Tyler against Melanie. What began as subtle shifts in loyalty soon grew into something more painful. Distance, coldness, and eventually, silence. The kind that cuts deeper than any argument. Nicole didn't just want to be a stepmother. She wanted control. And when someone didn't fall in line, she made sure they paid for it. Nicole had made up her mind. She wasn't going to play the role of stand-in mom to Melanie's kids anymore. And she wasn't going to do the bare minimum and just coexist peacefully either. That would have been too easy. Instead, she seemed to take a kind of cruel pleasure in making Melanie's daughter's life as hard as possible. While Shane worked long hours, Nicole ran the household like a drill sergeant. Melanie, still just a child herself, became more of a maid than a daughter. Every day after school, while other kids were doing homework or relaxing, Melanie was scrubbing, sweeping, folding. Every chore fell on her shoulders. But it didn't stop at one house. Once Nicole had wrung every ounce of labor out of her, she'd send Melanie down the street to her great-great-grandmother's house with yet another list of chores. There was no rest, no peace, just an endless cycle of being used, silenced, and discarded. Melanie tried to fight back. She wasn't the kind of girl to just roll over. She spoke up. She pushed back. But when you're a child in a house where adults control everything, how far can your voice really carry? She was fighting a losing battle, and the walls were closing in. And all the while, Gavin, sweet, bright Gavin, was caught in the crossfire of a home cracking under quiet cruelty. No one could have guessed what was coming next. But when it came, it would shake this family and this entire town to its core. On the outside, it looked like things had finally settled. Melanie was out of the picture. Shane had remarried. The kids had a new home in West Haven, a new maternal figure in their lives. Her name was Nicole Lee Scott. At first glance, Nicole seemed like she belonged. She was organized, firm, and involved, like someone who could bring structure to a family that had seen too much chaos. But what happened behind closed doors painted a much darker picture. Melanie, Gavin's older sister, was the first to truly feel the shift. Nicole had expectations, and when those weren't met, her behavior turned cruel. But it wasn't the loud, screaming kind of cruelty. It was quieter, more calculated. And when Melanie showed even the smallest hint of resistance, Nicole didn't just raise her voice. She raised her hand. Over time, Nicole broke Melanie down in ways that don't leave visible scars at first. She punished her into silence, conditioned her to believe that this was just how things worked, that pushing back would only make it worse. By the time she was old enough to understand what was happening, Melanie wasn't just scared. She was trapped. The home that should have felt safe had turned into something closer to a cage. Then in 2016, Melanie couldn't hide it anymore. The bruises were getting harder to explain away. Her sleeves couldn't cover everything. And her friends, they started asking questions. One of them, someone brave enough to listen and wise enough to act, told an adult. That's when everything started to unravel. Later that week, a caseworker from the Department of Children and Family Services showed up at Melanie's school. She asked questions. Milani answered, carefully at first, unsure of what might happen if she said too much. But the concern in her voice, the fear behind her eyes, it was enough to trigger serious alarms. The caseworker started asking what everyone else was thinking. Where was Shane? Was he turning a blind eye? And if this was happening to Milani, what about Gavin? Because by now, this wasn't just a question of bad parenting. This was a warning sign, and someone finally had noticed. The system was supposed to protect kids like Milani, but noticing and acting aren't always the same thing. And the longer it took for someone to intervene, the more danger Gavin was in. When Child Protective Services first got involved, the questions were direct and painfully serious. They asked Milani, Gavin's older sister, if she'd ever been hurt, if her stepmother, Nicole, had ever laid a hand on her, if it was true that she'd been forced to work under the blazing Utah sun for hours while Nicole watched on. Milani sat there, her young face stiff with anxiety. She hesitated, because what do you say when the person you're supposed to trust is also the one you're terrified of? What do you do when telling the truth might mean walking back into the arms of your abuser? So she lied. She told them what she thought they wanted to hear, that things were fine, that her friends had overreacted, that everything at home was normal. But there was nothing normal about the bruises on her body, and the caseworker sitting across from her knew that. She pleaded, begged with Milani to be honest, to trust her, to speak for herself when no one else could. And finally, with her voice barely holding steady, Milani broke. She told the truth. She described the abuse, the fear, the control, and just like that, the Department of Child and Family Services had more than suspicions. They had a statement. They had visible signs of harm. They had cause. So what did they do? They created what they called a safety plan. On paper, it meant that Milani was no longer allowed to be left alone in Nicole's care unless her father, Shane, was physically present. It was supposed to be a protective measure, a temporary barrier. So every day after school, Milani would walk down to her great-great-grandmother's house just a few doors away. She'd wait there until Shane got home from work, and only then would she return to the family home. DCFS saw this as a resolution. They marked the case handled, closed it out, moved on. But Milani didn't move on. Because in Nicole's eyes, Milani had done the unthinkable. She had talked. She had exposed the private terror Nicole worked so hard to keep hidden. And now Nicole wasn't just angry. She was humiliated. And she made Milani pay for it. From 2016 through 2019, the Peterson home became a private war zone for the teenage girl. A place where emotional torment and physical deprivation weren't the exception. They were the routine. Milani later revealed disturbing details. She claimed Nicole would intentionally withhold food from her, feeding her only mustard sandwiches day after day. No meat, no variety, just mustard, thick and bitter, smeared on bread she could barely stomach. Nicole knew Milani hated mustard. That was the point. It wasn't just about starvation, it was about humiliation. And as if that wasn't enough, she said Nicole would ration her water too, giving her a third of a cup, barely enough to wet her lips, even after making her work outside for hours in the heat. It was control disguised as discipline, punishment masked as parenting. And through it all, Milani was still just a child, navigating school, hiding bruises, swallowing her tears and trying to survive in a place that was supposed to be her home. But she wasn't the only one in that house. Gavin was watching, learning, soaking in every moment of tension and pain, the way kids often do when they can't make sense of the chaos around them. And no one, not the state, not the family, not the neighbors, seemed to realize just how dangerous things were becoming behind that front door. This wasn't just dysfunction, this was a ticking clock. And eventually, time would run out. By the time Gavin's older sister, Milani, reached her early teens, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a battlefield. And the scariest part? The ones firing emotional bullets were the very people who were supposed to protect her. Shane, her father, kept his distance. He didn't scream or throw punches, But his silence said enough. It was cold, detached, indifferent. And in a way, that was worse, because when your own father stops seeing you, it teaches you to disappear. Tyler, the older brother, started to change too. Melanie remembers how he began echoing their stepmother's cruelty, calling Melanie, their own mother, vile names, pretending she didn't even exist. He didn't speak to her like a sister anymore. It was as if whatever bond they had was erased, replaced by bitterness and blind loyalty to the people who'd slowly been reshaping his beliefs. But Gavin? According to Melanie, Gavin was still young enough to be spared the worst of it, at least for a while. She tried to shield him, to keep that spark of joy in him alive, but it was painfully clear that Nicole, Shane's new wife, harbored the same seething hatred for Gavin that she had for Melanie. In her eyes, both children were just pieces of Melanie. Still, Nicole seemed to reserve the bulk of her rage for Melanie. Maybe because Melanie was older. Maybe because she fought back or asked questions or refused to completely break. Nicole saw that spirit as rebellion, and she wanted it crushed. By 2018, Melanie had reached a breaking point. She was still just a child, barely a teenager, but every day felt like a test of survival. And one day she realized she couldn't take it anymore. She ran. She made it to a nearby gas station, shaking, desperate, and pleading with employees to help her. All she wanted was for someone to listen, someone to believe that behind the quiet walls of her home was something no child should ever endure. But instead of safety, what she got was protocol. The employees called Shane and Nicole. And when the couple showed up, they wore their masks well. Nicole was all crocodile tears, promising Melanie things would be different, that she'd try. Shane played the concerned father, telling her how much her siblings missed her, especially Gavin. Melanie's heart pulled in two directions. She missed her little brother. She wanted to believe her family could still be salvaged. So she agreed to go home. But the moment the car doors closed, the act shattered. Nicole's face twisted. Her voice turned venomous. She screamed at Melanie, then grabbed her, choking her so violently that Melanie thought she was going to black out right there in the back seat. Whatever hope she had clung to evaporated in seconds. The next day, Nicole pulled her out of school, claiming she'd be homeschooled from now on. But there were no lessons, no books, just more darkness. The abuse didn't stop. If anything, it grew worse. Melanie lived like that for another year. Then one day, in 2019, something small happened. Something most people would brush off in a heartbeat. She was mowing the lawn and accidentally ran over a sprinkler head, breaking it. But for Melanie, it felt like a death sentence. She stood there frozen, holding the shattered plastic in her hands, heart pounding, tears forming. Because she knew Nicole. She knew how little it took to set her off. And in that moment, she didn't see a broken sprinkler. She saw the next explosion waiting to happen. Trembling, she walked up to Shane and showed him what happened. And he didn't yell. He didn't comfort her either. He just stared at her and then told her to get in the truck. Melanie thought maybe he was taking her to get a replacement. Maybe he was trying to protect her from Nicole's wrath. But that wasn't it. He drove her to her mother's house, dropped her off on the porch, and left without a word. That was the last time Melanie ever saw her father. Years later, she would say, "They manipulated me into hating my mom." She had lived in a cage of control and cruelty, cut off emotionally, verbally attacked daily, and physically broken down in ways no child should have to endure. Nicole, she said, was relentless. She called her disgusting names. She humiliated her. One of the most disturbing incidents, Nicole allegedly shaved Melani's head as punishment for brushing her own hair. Melanie was only 13. And it wasn't just the verbal and physical degradation. She was starved, fed only once or twice a day. Enough to survive, but not enough to thrive. Her body shrank, but her fear grew. Every day, every hour was about getting through. She wasn't living. She was enduring. And still, somehow her heart stayed tethered to her little brother. Gavin was the light she couldn't let go of. But no one, not even Melanie, could have predicted how dark his world was about to become. It wasn't just what Gavin was eating that raised questions. It was how he was made to eat it. According to Melanie, Gavin's older sister, the very same foods that prosecutors later claimed contributed to his death by starvation were used as a form of psychological torment. Nicole, their stepmother, allegedly fed him mustard-covered meals, fully knowing the children hated mustard. It wasn't just neglect, it was humiliation. Melanie remembered moments that felt more like scenes from a horror film than real life. She says she was locked inside a bedroom, not grounded, locked, monitored constantly by a camera Nicole had set up. She recalled being zip-tied to the bed, ankles bound, and if she dared move, she was told she'd be beaten. And according to Melanie, that threat wasn't empty. She alleged repeated beatings, sometimes with a belt, other times with a wooden spoon. Pain wasn't just punishment, it was a routine, a way to control, to instill fear. By March of 2019, Melanie had reached a breaking point. A friend at school noticed the signs of abuse and reported it. Finally, the Department of Child and Family Services, DCFS, stepped in. But instead of taking immediate action, Melanie says they offered a safety plan. It was meant to be a compromise. Nicole wasn't allowed to be alone with her anymore. That was it. No removal, no protection. Just a promise. Melanie begged not to be sent back. She said she was terrified, not just afraid, but convinced she might not survive in that house. She even claimed that Nicole once looked her in the eye and said she wanted to kill her. Still, nothing changed. The alleged abuse dragged on for 2 more agonizing months until May 2019, when Melanie was finally allowed to go live with her mom again. But by then, the damage was already visible. When Melanie saw her daughter, she was stunned. Bruised, thin, hollowed out. This wasn't just bad parenting. It was trauma etched into skin and bone. Melanie knew something was deeply wrong, so she called the police. She wanted her other kids back, Gavin and the younger sibling, still under Shane and Nicole's care. But instead of opening an investigation, the police redirected her back to DCFS. Again. This time, a caseworker was assigned, but according to Melanie, he downplayed the entire situation. He described the father's household as simply stricter than the mother's. When Melanie brought up the fact that Nicole had shaved Melanie's head for brushing her own hair without permission, the caseworker reportedly brushed it off. "It's just a bad haircut," he said. But to Melanie, it wasn't a haircut. It was humiliation. It was punishment. Still, her allegations, despite being disturbing, were just barely enough to prompt a home visit. But Shane and Nicole were already prepared. By the time the caseworker arrived, they had rehearsed every line. Nicole did most of the talking. She came across as emotional, crying even. She said Melanie was rebellious and disrespectful. And as for the shaved head, Nicole claimed Melanie smelled like urine, and they were worried other kids would bully her. It was, she said, for her own good. When asked why Melanie had missed so many days of school, the couple pointed to an incident where she had run away from home. They claimed she was unstable, untrustworthy, and needed to be constantly watched. The caseworker turned to Shane and asked why he'd left his daughter with her mother so suddenly. Shane denied any story about a broken sprinkler, a claim Melanie had made, and instead admitted that he threatened to send her away if she misbehaved again. She was defiant, he said, so I followed through. In the end, it came down to one phrase, one that echoes through far too many failed investigations. It's their word against hers. And once again, the system sided with the adults. The official judgment? Melanie was probably just another angry teenager who didn't like rules. But the truth, what Melanie had been trying to say all along, was darker than anyone imagined. And by the time anyone listened, it was already far too late. At that point, it didn't matter to Melanie whether DCFS believed her or not. She was finally free. Out of that house, away from the pain, back with her mother. But for Melanie, the nightmare wasn't over. Not even close. Because Gavin was still in that house. Tyler, the oldest, was out of reach. He'd turned 18, and legally no one could force him to do anything. Sadly, Nicole had already gotten to him, manipulated him, twisted his view of his own mother and siblings until he wanted nothing to do with them. Melanie knew she'd lost Tyler. But Gavin was still just a child, and Melanie was determined to get him out of that home, no matter what it took. At first, Nicole didn't seem to care much about Gavin. He wasn't loved, but he wasn't targeted either. Not yet. That changed when Melanie left. Suddenly, there was a new vacancy in Nicole's twisted hierarchy, a new target for her cruelty. And Gavin, he was next in line. He took on all the burdens Melanie had carried before. Every chore, every punishment. Nicole made him work outside under the blazing sun for hours, and when he was done, his reward was the same miserable meal his sister had once been forced to eat, a mustard sandwich and a third of a cup of water. But that was if she decided he'd earned it. Most nights, Gavin went to bed with nothing at all. No food, no water, just pain. He began to waste away. His ribs jutted out through his skin like warning signs no one wanted to see. Melanie, desperate and horrified, tried to document what was happening. She attempted to take a photo of Gavin's fragile, starved body, but Nicole and Shane fought back. They filed a complaint with DCFS, accusing Melanie of trying to manipulate Gavin and violate custody orders. Instead of investigating the abuse, DCFS turned the tables. They issued a judgment that both households needed to do better. The solution? Mandatory in-home services. But when it came to Gavin's side of the story, no one pushed. No one asked the hard questions. And Melanie wasn't the only one worried. At school, cafeteria staff began to notice things that didn't sit right. Gavin would come through the lunch line and ask for nothing but a cup of water. Then he'd hang around the trash cans. He'd wait until all the other kids had gone back to class, then dig through the garbage for scraps. That's how hungry he was. Too ashamed to speak up, Gavin finally confided in Jan, one of the cafeteria workers. He told her the truth. He hadn't eaten in days. He didn't have lunch money. He didn't have anything. Jan and her co-workers couldn't turn their backs. They pooled their own money to quietly fund Gavin's lunch account. Just enough so he could get something hot to eat during the day. But Nicole found out. And when she did, she stormed into the school. Furious, she berated the staff, saying that if she wanted Gavin to eat, she would have given him money. That it wasn't their place. And even though the school staff knew something was terribly wrong, they were afraid to argue. Nicole was the legal guardian. Their hands were tied, so they stopped funding his meals. But they didn't stop caring. Staff members began sharing their own lunches with him. Sometimes the other kids would quietly hand him sandwiches or snacks too. At school, Gavin found a shred of safety. At home, he found nothing but torment. Behind the scenes, the school was doing what they could. Over the years, the district made several calls to local child welfare agencies, each time raising alarms about Gavin's well-being. Under the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, DCFS had to track all reports connected to Gavin or to anyone in Shane and Nicole's care. The earliest dates back to 2018. That one involved bruises on Melanie, but it was closed just a month later. DCFS claimed Gavin was safe. Then came more calls. On February 27, 2020, shortly after Melanie returned to her mother's care, the first report specifically mentioning Gavin was filed. 3 months later, a juvenile court ordered both households to undergo in-home services. But when another call came in on August 24th, just 3 months after that, DCFS dismissed it. Insufficient evidence. Still, the caseworker marked the Pearson family's services as successfully completed by May 2021. Gavin stayed with his father. The case was closed. But the problems weren't. On September 21st, 2022, 16 months later, yet another report came in. This time, a DCFS supervisor reviewed it. But once again, they decided it didn't meet the legal threshold to open a new investigation. Then came 2023. On March 28th, DCFS received a new report alleging physical neglect of Gavin. This time, they opened an investigation. 2 days later, another report came in with more disturbing claims, and that was added to the file. Finally, someone from DCFS went to speak with Gavin. It was March 31st, 2023. They interviewed him at school, away from Nicole and Shane. But Gavin, he denied everything. He told them there was no abuse, no mistreatment at home. The report didn't mention whether the investigator noted Gavin's condition, if he looked frail or hungry, but teachers and cafeteria workers had been raising red flags for months. Shortly after that interview, Gavin was pulled from school completely. Nicole claimed she would homeschool him. On May 15, 2023, DCFS conducted one final home visit. This time, neither Nicole nor Shane was there. But again, Gavin said nothing was wrong. And with no visible proof, no testimony, no evidence, the case was closed. DCFS marked it as unsupported. But there were signs everywhere. You just had to look. Inside the Peterson home, it was as if Gavin didn't exist. Investigators later noted that the house was full of photos, happy, smiling kids on the walls and the computer, but none of Gavin, not one. Even Shane's co-workers were confused. One of them said Shane had a framed photo of his youngest son on his desk, but they had never even heard of Gavin. The only trace of him they could find, text messages, dark, disturbing messages between family members, where they joked about torturing him. Not once did they call him by his name, just slurs, insults, dehumanizing language. The contrast was staggering. The other kids had warm bedrooms with carpet. Gavin's room, plywood flooring, cold, hard. Tape had been laid down in the shape of a rectangle. His bed, no mattress, no blankets. Just a box drawn on the floor. There was dried black vomit in the corners. Investigators were horrified, but the worst hadn't been discovered yet. Tyler, now an adult, had started taking part in the abuse. He once beat Gavin with a piñata stick, saying he was being defiant, and Gavin, already starving, was denied food and even water. At his lowest, with no options left, Gavin began eating his own feces to survive. On July 9, 2024, at around 2:40 p.m., the Weber County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call from Nicole. She said her stepson was unresponsive. When deputies arrived, they found Gavin barely clinging to life. He was cold to the touch, his body frail and starved. The paramedics didn't hesitate. They rushed him to McCady Hospital, doing everything they could to keep him alive. But it was too late. Just minutes after arriving, doctors pronounced Gavin dead. His official cause of death was complications from sepsis, worsened by pneumonia, dehydration, and untreated infections. He was covered in wounds. His body told a story no child should ever have to live through. Nicole, during the 911 call, said Gavin had been feeling dizzy earlier that morning, that he collapsed in the tub. She claimed she tried CPR while waiting for help to arrive. But by then, the damage was irreversible. Gavin's voice had been silenced. But the evidence? It was screaming. What Nicole didn't tell 911 dispatcher, what she deliberately left out, was perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire case. See, when she found Gavin's body, cold, unresponsive, barely clinging to life in the tub, she didn't call for help right away. Not even close. Nearly half an hour passed before that call went through. And in those critical, life or death moments, when every second might have made a difference, she didn't perform CPR. She didn't scream for help. She didn't panic like a mother should. Instead, Nicole picked up the phone and called Shane. Not the police, not an ambulance. Shane. She asked him what they should do. And that conversation alone lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes, where Gavin's tiny, battered body lay still in that tub, shutting down. 11 minutes where no help was coming. And even after that call, there was still no urgency. Nicole spent the next 10 minutes unscrewing and reversing the lock on Gavin's bedroom door, a lock that had been installed backwards, designed to keep him inside like a prisoner. By the time paramedics were finally called, it was too late. But the cover-up didn't end there. While Gavin was gasping for life, Tyler, his older brother, wasn't rushing to help him either. Instead, he sent texts to Shane in a panic. But he wasn't panicking because Gavin was dying. He was terrified that they might get caught. He messaged Shane that Gavin wasn't breathing and asked, "What do we do now?" Not, "What can we do to save him?" But "How do we cover this up?" Tyler knew. He knew if the police saw Gavin, if they saw the bruises, the starvation, the condition of that room, it was over for all of them. So Tyler did something chilling. Security footage later showed him making 3 separate trips to the shed in their backyard, each time carrying more surveillance equipment. Cameras, wires, storage devices. He was pulling down everything, especially the ones monitoring Gavin's room. Because yes, there were cameras in Gavin's room. Multiple. And not for protection. These weren't baby monitors. These weren't security cameras set up for peace of mind. They were there so that Nicole, Shane, and Tyler could watch Gavin suffer in real time. So they could track his movements, monitor his pain, control every moment of his life like he was an animal in a cage. Authorities later uncovered photos from Nicole's own phone. Heartbreaking, gut-wrenching images. Gavin alone, sitting in a room stripped of carpeting, furniture, or warmth. A taped-off square on the plywood floor was all he had for a bed. No blankets, no mattress, nothing. One photo showed him in a diaper, his frail body covered in filth. Another showed sores on his back, untreated, open, festering. There were even text messages Nicole and Shane had tried to delete, sickening conversations, where they talked about Gavin like he wasn't even human. They didn't even use his name. They used insults, derogatory slurs, dehumanizing terms. They referred to him as a burden, an object of hatred. In one exchange, Nicole wrote to Shane, "I hate Gavin more every single day." In court, one moment stood out. A school nurse had once reached out to Nicole, concerned about Gavin's infected nail bed. She thought she was alerting a mother, a protector. Instead, Nicole scoffed. She ranted to Shane, saying Gavin was only pretending for attention. It was this overwhelming pattern of cruelty that earned Nicole the title of primary aggressor in the eyes of the court. And finally, in April 2025, Nicole was sentenced. 15 years to life for first-degree murder, plus 6 additional sentences of 1 to 15 years each for other felony charges, including aggravated child abuse and obstruction of justice, all to be served consecutively. You'd think that moment, being sentenced for the torture and death of a 12-year-old child, would carry some weight. But when Nicole took her mugshot, she smiled. Like this was a joke, like none of this had ever happened, as if the shattered life of a child didn't matter. Before handing down the sentence, Judge Camille Ney delivered words that sent a chill through the courtroom. "Nicole, I'm not going to offer you a glimmer of hope. Not today. I don't know if you'll ever get out, and frankly, I hope that you don't. You will never see your grandchildren. You'll never be there for your children's milestones. But that is a small price to pay for what you've done to Melanie, and more so, what you've done to Gavin." And what about Shane, Gavin's biological father? He pled guilty too, not just for Gavin, but for abusing Melanie and putting their youngest child in danger. His charges included 3 counts of aggravated child abuse and multiple counts of child endangerment. At his sentencing, the judge didn't mince words. "You don't deserve to be called a father. I'm more emotional about your son's death than you are." That says everything. Shane was sentenced to 8 years to life in prison. The court reviewed a damning report by Dr. Lassie, a specialist from the University of Utah, who confirmed what everyone already feared deep down. Gavin didn't just die, he suffered. He suffered long before his final breath, and he was aware of what was happening to him. Gavin likely knew there was food in the house. He probably smelled it, saw it, watched others eat while he sat starving. He was left so deprived, so broken, that he eventually overcame the body's natural revulsion and began eating his own feces just to survive. Dr. Lassie called it what it was: child torture, psychological torture, physical torture, emotional isolation. This was a boy once described by teachers as bright, sweet, and energetic, slowly crushed under the weight of cruelty so relentless it broke him, mind, body, and spirit. He was locked away, deprived of clothes, forced into diapers, forbidden from school, friends, laughter, care, love. Surveillance cameras watched his every move. His tormentors, the very people meant to protect him, treated him as less than human. The final days of Gavin's life were filled with agony, and he knew it. He felt it. He would have been hungry enough to risk pain to stay alive, To fight his own body just to survive one more day, Dr. Lassie wrote. The judge concluded with this: "You allowed this to go on day after day, week after week, month after month. You could have stopped it. You didn't. You were part of it." This wasn't just another tragic case. This was a horror story unfolding in real life. And for the judge, a seasoned legal mind who had seen it all, this one broke her. "In 25 years, she said, choking up, "I've never cried in court. Until now." It's hard to overstate just how disturbing this case really is. The depth of the cruelty, the layers of deception. It's the kind of horror that lingers. And the judge saw it too. During Shane's sentencing, she didn't mince her words. She made it clear that whatever excuses he might have had, they didn't matter anymore. Not after what had come to light. She pointed directly to the lengths they all went to, deleting footage, hiding cameras, wiping out evidence, as proof that Shane knew exactly what he was doing. That if it had been anything less than pure evil, he wouldn't have tried to cover it up so thoroughly. As the judge put it, "Anything you try to say now falls on deaf ears. If those deleted files weren't incriminating, why erase them?" The reality is, no one knows how long Gavin had truly suffered. No one knows just how many times Shane stood by, watching, or even participated. But what is known, what no one in that courtroom could deny, is that Shane helped dehumanize a little boy, and that dehumanization ended Gavin's life. At one point, the defense tried to bring up character references, letters from people who once knew Shane and wanted the court to consider the good he'd done. But the judge shut that door too. She looked him dead in the eyes and told him that anything good he might have done in his past, it had all been wiped away. All of it, erased by what he allowed to happen to that child. Then came the sentence. Shane Peterson was ordered to serve 5 years to life for child abuse homicide, a first-degree felony. On top of that, he received 3 additional terms of 1 to 15 years each for aggravated child abuse, and 1 more sentence up to 5 years for child endangerment, all to be served consecutively. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was a message. You don't get to walk away from this. Shane took that deal, knowing full well that if the charges had been pushed to murder, things could have been even worse for him. But justice in some form was already catching up. And then there was Tyler, Gavin's older brother. Tyler pled guilty on March the 20th, under the classification of having a mental condition. He admitted to 4 charges, including child abuse resulting in homicide. Unlike Shane and Nicole, Tyler wasn't sent straight to prison. Instead, he was released to the care of his family while undergoing treatment, on the condition that he stay in regular contact with his attorney and pretrial services. You see, throughout the investigation and court proceedings, Tyler was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, persistent depressive disorder, a personality disorder, and generalized anxiety. It's a lot to take in. There's so much gray here, especially when it comes to Tyler's role. How much did he understand? How much was he manipulated? And how much did he participate willingly? Those are questions that the court will continue to examine when it comes time for his final sentencing. We'll keep following it here on True Crimes by Dominik as more details emerge. But here's where things get even more unsettling. Because Gavin's story isn't the only one like this. If you've been following the channel for a while, you might remember the case of Timothy Ferguson, another heartbreaking tale where a young boy was tormented, watched on camera as he wasted away. And just like in Gavin's case, an older sibling was involved. In Timothy's case, it was Paul Ferguson, his own brother, and their mother, Shondanda Vander Ark, who together carried out that prolonged abuse. Paul was sentenced to 30 to 100 years behind bars. And if history repeats itself, if the court sees Tyler in the same light, he may end up serving just as long. There's a link to Timothy's full story pinned in the comments if you want to understand how tragically common this kind of horror can be. Back in West Haven, the town where Gavin spent his final days, the grief is still raw. He loved the color blue, and when people gathered to mourn, blue was everywhere. Blue ribbons, blue balloons, blue stuffed toys left at a makeshift memorial that marked the unthinkable loss of a child who, by all accounts, never stood a chance. The entire community turned out to remember him, and as they did, many couldn't shake the guilt, the haunting thought that maybe, just maybe, they should have done more. They knew Gavin wasn't going to school anymore. They knew Nicole had a violent temper. Some even saw the boy, skin and bones, shuffling along, desperate for food. And yet nothing happened. No one stepped in. No one forced a change. Even worse, Gavin had already been on the radar of Utah's Department of Child and Family Services since 2014, 10 long years before his death. There were red flags everywhere. Reports of neglect, complaints from the school, concerns raised again and again, and every time the system looked away, whether it was a lack of staff, funding, or just sheer negligence, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Gavin was failed, over and over and over again. Rachel Reynolds, a staff member from Gavin's school, described him as having a bright smile, but a frail body that was screaming for help. She remembers one day in particular, finding Gavin rummaging through the trash in the cafeteria, looking for something, anything to eat. Rachel couldn't bear it. "I just couldn't let a child eat food from the trash," she said. So even when they were told not to, she and others began sneaking food to Gavin, trying to keep him going, doing what they could when the system wouldn't. Rachel took him to the school nurse once. When she noticed his fingers were swollen and infected, she hoped the principal calling DCFS would finally get someone's attention, someone with authority. But no one ever came. No one checked. And that's the most haunting part of this story, Warmra. Gavin's death wasn't just the result of one evil person or even a twisted family dynamic. It was a collective failure, a slow, silent unraveling of every safeguard meant to protect children like him. His story should have ended differently. And maybe, just maybe, if someone had listened, really listened, it would have. When Gavin was pulled out of school, everyone who had known him, even from a distance, felt that quiet dread settle in, that awful, unshakable sense that something terrible was coming. And then, he was just gone. No visits, no check-ins, no way to reach him. Rachel, the school worker who had tried so hard to help, said it best. They lost all contact. He vanished behind closed doors. And once that happened, no one, not a teacher, not a neighbor, not a friend, was allowed to see him again. By then, it was already too late. Rachel now calls for changes to Utah's homeschooling laws, hoping that no other child disappears the way Gavin did, hidden behind a legal wall, invisible to the very people meant to protect him. Because Gavin deserves so much more than this. He deserved to laugh, to grow, to feel safe. He should have had birthdays and best friends and favorite songs on the radio. He should have seen his name on a graduation list, but instead the world will never know the young man he might have become. Justice, if we can even call it that, feels like a shallow echo when we remember the truth. Gavin cried for help in every way he knew how, and still, somehow, no one came. In one of the final lines of his obituary, someone wrote, "Gavin was a bright spark, destined to be a huge personality, even though his time on earth was cut tragically short. Although we will miss him, he will forever remain in our hearts." That spark was dimmed far too soon. But maybe, if we remember him not just as a victim, but as a symbol of every missed warning sign, of every child who suffers in silence, then maybe that spark still matters. So now we ask you, what could have been done differently? Where did the system truly break? Was it DCFS? Was it the silence of neighbors? Or something bigger? Something that's broken in the way we handle abuse behind closed doors? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your voice might be the very one that helps push for change. If this story moved you, if Gavin's life touched you, even through a screen, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to True Crimes by Dominik. We drop new stories every 2 days, diving into the darkest corners of real-life cases, the ones that demand to be heard. And don't forget to turn on notifications. That little bell is the difference between missing the truth and being part of the conversation. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and hold your loved ones close, because sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't strangers in the dark. They're the ones right inside the house. This is True Crimes by Dominik. We'll see you in 2 days.